All right, for people joining this live stream, we are looking at some integration of Wikidata into Wolfram Language. And it isn't as good as what we have, but it's useful because it has all kinds of random things. All right, let's take a look here. Okay, so I should look at, okay, but these things will be system symbols, right? They will not need the graph store context.
Yes, the 4 symbols that we want to review today, they should become system.
Why didn't they turn black here?
That requires the prototype so far.
Okay, should I just use the prototype build?
Yes.
If it will only start. Oh, there we go, something's happening. Is it dying on startup? Oh, no, it seemed to work. Okay. So here, let's read that into prototype. Okay, so wait a minute. So if I say needs graph store here, no, it's still blue. This is the prototype build. So what's going on? Oh, no, wait a minute. Why does that say that? This is supposed to be the prototype build. Don't tell me 6511595. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, could somebody get hold of Roger, find out what happened to my prototype build? Anybody here could do that? Do I have to do it?
I can find him.
No. We need a better method than that.
It's a project without project manager, so there's no better method.
Okay, I'll do it myself then. Hold on, let me put this on mute. All right, I think I have a solution here. Okay, there we go. All right, so what happens if I don't give a max items here?
You get maybe 50 results, up to 50.
So what are all these different Alberts? Am I seeing kind of the garbage of what's in Wikidata?
Well, there might be a music album or a movie or other things that are named after this physicist. No?
I see. So when we give, and by the way, why is this boldface? That wouldn't be boldface for our own entity, would it?
The entities are slightly different. They are bold on input and later less bold
Okay, so that we should copy that. We shouldn't have these be bold. Why would we have these be bold when the other ones are not?
Yes, so there's a link to this sign document that makes some suggestions, but
okay. Do we have a designer here? Do we have design? Who made this design? Who made this design?
Tony, do you know the name of the designer? I don't remember from the team.
Okay, so let's get hold of whoever made this design. Was it Chris, Billy, somebody?
Billy Shore.
Okay, so let's please get him on this call.
Yep.
Somebody do that? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So with him, we have been discussing some interesting questions. So how to exactly style them and why? For instance, should the label replace the ID or should it shown in addition to the ID?
I mean, this version went through a couple iterations.
Let's wait till we have a designer. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, maybe we can keep looking at these things, okay? Okay. Okay. Let's look at the these pages.
So this is a pretty powerful function similar to entity value, but with some additional and some other functions that are not there. No? For instance, Wikidata Data does not do caching because an editor might usually want the latest value they just entered in Wikidata.
Oh, that's not a good argument. I think there should be an option to cache. That's a silly argument. The fraction of people editing is tiny compared to the fraction of people using. Okay?
Over which timescale do you want to cache?
I don't know. Let's put a parameter in there. I mean, you know, what's the how do we do caching? How do we specify caching for, you know, entity prefetch has a mechanism, and then it has a time to live, right?
So alpha knows or sends information how long data value should be cached. Wikidata doesn't.
Of course not. Of course not. But I mean, caching it for an hour, right? If you're just a user and not an editor, you absolutely want it cached. Am I making sense?
Yeah, an hour might seem reasonable.
But it's just silly to not cache it. I mean, for the sake of the 0.001% of people who might be editing, right? That's a wrong decision. I mean,
I'm not 100% convinced. Isn't not kind of the natural continuation of this that import and related things would cache other things?
Oh, no. This is supposed to be some kind of knowledge-based thing. I mean, it's not supposed to be something. Okay, why is this in some huge font here? That seems wrong. That's just a minor mistake, but somebody needs to fix it. There should have been a project manager in this meeting. I really don't like doing these without that. But anyway, whatever. So can somebody make a note of that, please? Or do I have to go send that in?
No, we can do.
Okay.
Billy is here now.
Okay. All right. So this is like entity value, you said.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Why is it not called Wikidata value?
That's an interesting question that also someone at a conference brought up, says. And so we have two ways of naming functions one that names the object that goes in and then calls it value, say date value, and other functions like coordinate chart data. And in this case, it's more like the service that we are using is in the first argument. So that's why the data function makes more sense.
Okay, what is all of this stuff?
So it's a rich data model, and this allows controlling some of those things, and in other cases allows or describes how you can query things. So this is all in this page.
Okay, and do we have, presumably we have some monitoring system for the Wikidata Sparkle endpoint, so that if it goes down, we produce a message that's reasonable, that doesn't just say, that doesn't just, disgorge random internal code.
Yeah, so the failure object that is returned from our URL utilities is passed through, so an interested user can investigate what happened.
Yeah. Look, we need Syscom to monitor this endpoint if we're going to be using it, right? They should write a test for that endpoint, and if that fails, it should do something. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Rather than it, are we proxying this, or are we going, is it going direct?
This is going to the live Wikidata Sparkle endpoint.
Okay, but we're not proxying that connection.
No.
Okay, each item. What is Q2 or P31? Is that?
Q2 is Earth.
Okay, well, I don't care what
those are. Those are Wikidata entity and property identifiers.
I see.
Entities are Q something, properties are P something.
I would use a longer number here because it will be less obscure. And by the way, in this, you should put those in italics, the NNN.
Okay.
Label of the item, the description of the item. So, okay. But there are many different properties which would be supported by, so this raw Wikidata, so for the property, I can give the raw Wikidata identifier as a string, or I can give an external identifier object, correct?
Correct.
And these are ones that are built-in, guaranteed to be supported. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is this? External identifier types. What is that?
Another symbol that we should review. Those are the possible first arguments of external identifier. It's just a variable, just like services.
I see. Okay, so right now, okay, do these other ones work?
All of them do work, yes, with Wikidata.
That's good. Don't we want this to be capital A?
In that particular case, no. I think
I
that's
would
how
also
archive.
say no.
So each of them is very carefully chosen.
I think that's inconsistent with how Service Connect refers to archive.
That doesn't mean that Service Connect got it right.
That's true.
I think we capitalize the first letter, and that's just the way it is.
I think so too.
Okay, I think we should do that. Anyway, okay, so great. So then these, so let's talk about, so each one of these, if I assume I can't pick a random, so how much of the entity stuff works on these?
Each entity that we can map to a Wikidata ID?
No, I didn't mean that. I meant on these, the functions. So if this is external identifier of, how do I get an external identifier for something?
Well, you start typing, let's say ISBN, and then read it off your book, for instance.
Okay, all right, fine. But I mean, I don't have a book here, so.
But then also, if you have a Wikidata item, you can ask for an ISBN 10. using Wikidata data.
Okay, so let's say how do I get okay, let's try the Bible. Is that an entity for us? Let's hope that's an entity for us. Oh, unless this is totally broken. Is this totally broken? This is the prototype build. Is this not able to? Let's try another thing. I don't know if that's okay. Well, that might have been a bug. Okay. So let's try. Then I can say ISBN 10 here.
Yes.
And I get nothing. So if I do.
Yeah, that could have two reasons. Either we don't have the Wikidata ID mapping, or Wikidata doesn't have the
Okay,
ID.
so if I say properties, I get nothing as well. So that's not good.
But what should happen?
Shouldn't we get a list of properties from Wikidata? Didn't I just
If we had Wikidata alignment, but you picked an entity that we don't have Wikidata alignment for.
So we don't know the properties.
But wait a minute, there's no properties thing here either. Where is that?
There is currently no properties.
Okay, so we should have one of those because we have that for everything else, and that should be a synonym for all.
But,
okay?
But do you mean just the identifiers for the properties, or do you mean the actual values?
I assume I mean whatever this does, all properties, which means.
But this means give me values for all available.
Well, that's
properties.
not right. That's not what we do for other entities, right?
No,
if I say
there's
this,
no support for all currently.
I'm sorry? No, I know that, but most entities, I do this, and I say properties, and I get the properties there.
Yes,
right?
That makes sense.
Okay, so we should do the same thing here. And I don't know what this means, because if this is giving values, that's not the right thing, right?
Yes.
I mean, it should, if that's, I don't even know how it would return those.
So you usually use it in the combination of Wikidata data, then your item, then, for instance, non-identifier properties, comma, dataset.
Okay, I don't think that's the name that we should have for that, because it's not consistent with what we do elsewhere. So what's this going to do? Okay, so this is going to give a whole bunch of, what the heck is that? Oh, that's a property value, which seems not very useful here because it's not telling me what property has that value, right?
Yes.
So this seems like a kind of useless thing to return. I mean, in other words, if we're doing this, using up all to do this seems wrong, right? Unless there's a description. No, in the entity external identifier contains no information about which property this is. Hey, whoever's typing in our ear, could you stop doing that, please?
So the idea is that you rather would use a more descriptive format, let's say association or dataset in the second argument, if you want it decorated.
We say dataset for, in this case, right? If we're doing wherever it was, right? If we have this here, we already have a whole mechanism for this, right? So we should just reuse it. If you say dataset here, right? We get this.
Yes,
right?
and the same works for Wikidata data in the second argument dataset.
Okay, fine. Okay, but I don't know what this is, but I think it's wrong. I think properties, it should do the exact same thing that properties does here, which is just give a list of properties.
Okay.
Make sense? And then if you want to decorate that with identifier properties and non-identifier properties, you don't quite understand what that means. So that means properties that we have built in, right? That second one.
No.
It is rather, Wikidata has about over 6,000 properties, and 4,000 of them are identifiers, external identifiers. They're external identifiers. That means sometimes you don't care about them.
Okay. Someone on our live stream, by the way, points out that some properties have freshness associated with them, which would give time to live information. Am I making sense?
I'm not aware of that, but I can look into it.
Why don't we look at, well, why don't we look here? We should be able to figure that out here. Okay, what is this supposed to mean? So this is an implicit list of items, can be specified. Okay, what does this have to do with anything? What's the type here? Entity type or an external identifier. Okay. Oh, please don't have things where there's a big long 4-line explanation here. Come on, we know we're not supposed to do that.
Yeah,
Right.
I thought hard how to write that.
Okay. Do you really need me to help? I'm sure I don't need to help. You can
Okay,
write something short
try
here
to-
and then you write it
Yes.
afterwards in some longer form.
Yes.
That seems very wrong. Okay. Sure, we can give more than one example in basic examples for a function with this much information in it.
Yes.
Okay. But so here, what we obviously need to do, right, is that presumably there's a mapping. So what is the status of the mapping from our entities to Wikidata entities?
There's a lot of it, and we're constantly updating those. I mean, one thing I've just noticed is I think there's still some holes where we have Wikipedia alignment and we haven't filled in the Wikidata IDs. Like some of your book examples before, where we have Wikipedia alignment and we just need to. We can programmatically get the mapping to Wikidata and fill in those IDs.
Okay, so unlike a value, this is returning a list.
Yes.
By the way, I just did one thing. I tried to do a drag select across this thing and it failed, so that needs to be reported in the prototype. Oh, that time it worked. But the previous time, when I drag selected across the thing that was that entity, it refused to do the drag select. I think it put up a message here about something. Okay, so wait a minute. So the value is given in a list here. Why is that?
In general, there can be multiple values claimed by different sources. Or sometimes legitimately multiple values like authors.
Okay, but I think that's probably wrong in general, right? Because if you're going to use this like an entity property value thing, you don't want that list. We have a third argument for entity value that specifies whether to decorate in ways like that, right?
So, but in the example of population of a city, should that always be a single value?
Yes,
because usually
it should always be a single value, just like it is for our entity property value system. Right?
But
it should always be a single value, or code won't work, right?
But there's no mechanic way of determining whether a property should have a single or a list value. And that uncertainty makes it later on harder to work with those values.
Okay, but it's not going to work. If we're going to have this be the analog of entity property, it's not going to work to return values in a list. So how are we going to deal with that? Or we're going to say it's nothing to do with entity property. And what happens if I take Wikidata, this thing here, and I do a sub-value thing on it? What happens if I do this?
Nothing.
Why not?
Because in general, this is an external identifier has no knowledge and cannot have a knowledge of where to get its information from.
Why?
For instance, what is the canonical service for ISBN? There's none.
I don't know.
There might be other services.
We could pick one. That's what we have to do. I mean, it's like, what's the canonical service for finding image search, for doing image search on the web? We pick one and change it with a different method option. We're dealing with corner cases here. We need to deal with the main case, right? But it's not going to work. If this thing randomly returns lists and non-lists, that's going to mess things up anyway. Now, I don't understand how for this case here, where you're doing an entity class search? What do you think? Give me an example of how that would work.
So control equal largest lakes in Europe. Not sure that it's going to work, but then you have an entity class, and this one is translated by Wikidata Data to a Sparkle query.
Wait. This is just using our, this is just using our entity, our knowledge base. So I'm asking the question, how, you understand what I'm asking?
No. I think you're speaking about slightly different things. One of you is speaking about the query, and the other one is speaking about the result of the query.
Okay, fine. So if I take this query, right, where I should be able to do an entity value on this. Wait a minute. What do I want here? I want entity list.
list.
Oh. Okay, magnificent. Okay, so how do I do the same thing? What is your description of how we do the same thing?
Yeah, you would say Wikidata data of that class, comma, and then the property values that you want to extract for each member.
So wait a second. So this class here, you're saying, so I say Wikidata data of that class. Now what?
Some property, let's say.
Well, I just want to know the names of them. How do I get their names?
Let's say Wikidata ID, the string Wikidata ID or entity. Yeah. That doesn't work yet because it relies on property and type alignment that hasn't reached our production alpha servers yet. Because somehow the lake and the countries and the item has to be translated to Wikidata. So this is soon to reach production.
Okay, but wait a second. This is a weird construct, right? Because what is Wikidata data? You said it's something like entity value.
Yes.
But if I said entity value, so if I say entity value of 15 and then I say entity, is that right? Or do I say
entities?
Okay, so you're trying to model something like that happening,
yeah,
right?
You could, instead of entities, you could say area. Yeah, that gets the area for each member.
In this case here, right?
Yes.
Oh, I know that, right.
Data is following exactly the same model. Yeah, maybe it's another property, but yeah.
Well.
Surface area or whatever.
Okay, so let's say, just for fun, magnificent. Okay.
And you could decorate it in the third argument with dataset to see which area corresponds to which entity, and the same is then possible in Wikidata data.
Okay, I'm not convinced about the name Wikidata data, given all of this. Let's think about that for a second. I mean, so, because this is very much modeling itself on entity value, right?
Yes.
I kind of think Wikidata value is the right name. It bothers me a lot, this list return value thing. But at least with entity value, with Wikidata value, one has a fighting chance of understanding that one can put an entity class in the first argument. Mm-hmm. And also, I think the idea of Wikidata value of one of our entities, I mean, what else can it return? Okay, so this list here, I don't understand. I mean, is take largest not supported then? Is that what you're trying to tell me here?
That's following directly below that list. So there's a distinction between Boolean predicates and other operators that have to look at the whole list.
Okay, But so why are you, I mean, we don't list that in the case of entity value. I don't think you should list it out in a big table like this, because I think it makes it, you know, more obvious. It makes it more questioning which ones are not there, so to speak. Okay? And I don't understand why you say missing Q without an X there. So just list them out, equal to, unequal to,
no,
etc. Right?
That is actually consistent, because you would say rule equal to 5, but you would just say.
I see. Those are curried things. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
And in the Wikidata, so in entity value, we support any function, but in the Wikidata case, it's more restricted because we can only support things that can be compiled to Sparkle, and that's why we have the complete list of things that are currently possible.
Okay, but so is this possible as well? Why don't you list that in this table?
To make a distinction between Boolean operators, and there's another distinction. Boolean operators, you can as many if you want, while there's only support for a single take largest or smallest rule. Because, yeah.
Okay. Okay, what's this? Item spec all format. Following options. Well, wait a minute. For what? Options for what? These are not options.
Wikidata
Those are not
data.
options. Those are, the following values for format can be used. Right? That's what this is. Is that correct?
No, the format values are explained above.
Okay, but then we don't have string options. We don't have options which are strings.
Yes.
So we can't use those. So figure out another way to do that. Following options can be given to Wikidata data altogether?
Yes.
Okay, so this is completely unclear. What language to use, in what sense to use?
For instance, the labels that are embedded in the returned external identifiers.
So it's what to use in return values, or what to use in what you enter?
In return values. In Wikidata search, it also affects the input. So you can selectively search through German or French labels.
Okay, so that's a different, okay. Okay, let's go back here. What the heck is the label of the item? What does that even mean?
So if you click on any of those boxes, let's say moon, then you can see what it actually means on the Wikidata website.
So I'm going to, it's a link and it goes there.
Yeah, so moon is the label in English, and then there are other labels in other languages.
Okay.
And the description is what appears directly below.
There's no directly below. What do you mean directly below? There's no directly below.
On the website, and in this case, embedded in the tooltip.
There's no tooltip showing up here.
Over the label.
There's no tooltip showing up here.
Then, yeah.
I don't know what's wrong.
This is an issue with the front end that I encountered before, that sometimes tooltips are not showing.
That tooltip shows, but that's giving the complete external identifier. Is that really what we want? Rather than giving a formatted thing. I think we want a formatted thing here.
For now, this is following entity, which shows as tooltip the input form or something like that. And we could have a better tooltip, of course.
Well, I think in this case, it's necessary, because in the case of entity, we parenthesize the disambiguation stuff that we need, don't we? Do we do that? How do we do that for?
The disambiguation is in the formatting directly. So the tooltip just shows you the canonical name and the type, basically.
I don't understand. This gives no tooltip here.
Yeah, once you
must
not until you accept it.
I see. Okay. So that's that tooltip. So that makes some sense, I suppose. Okay. Okay, let's look at the discussion of the formatting over here. Karks on our live stream is commenting on why there are multiple values Yeah, I know. I mean, to me, returning a list is just such a mess. Because
Well, what do you do if the world is a mess and you can't figure out which part of the mess is the clean part, or they're both
I
messy?
understand. We know this thing is a mess. That's why, you know, that's why we do what we do.
But there are things where there really isn't a clear answer.
I understand. What would we do in a case like that? I mean, we don't have
Handle intervals about upper
maybe.
limits, like neutrino mass.
Yeah. But those are comparatively rare for us. I mean, what's happening in Wikidata is that all kinds of people are throwing all kinds of random gunk in, and people don't know which one is right.
That's not
there might
entirely
not
true.
Yeah, there might not be one that is right, and it might not be gunk. There just might be more than one for various reasons that are good reasons in some cases. Although there's surely gunk in there too.
For instance, the apparent magnitude of a star, you might initially think that's just one value, but it depends actually on the band filter that you use. No?
Of course. But that's why we document what we think it means, right? And this is just, oh, well, somebody, the issue is what they're doing is to take an English name like apparent magnitude. They don't think they're documenting, I guess, what it really means. Anyway, look, it's some.
No, but they I mean, Tony could give you an example. It gives the values, and you can also get additional attributes on each of those values that tell you which band it is.
Well, maybe. Okay, who knows?
Yes. Discuss this case with Jeff. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. But what we have is a naked list of values here.
The logical consequence is it's Wikidata value list.
Yeah. Which would at least say what's going on. I mean, is it always going to be a list? It's always going to be a list, isn't it?
Yes, for consistency. I could run some queries checking whether there's any property that always has one value, but I doubt it.
All right. So we should say, well, okay. I mean, it's an argument to use Wikidata data. Jesse on our live stream is asking, why aren't we just using entity value of external identifier? Well, I think this is one good reason. Are there other reasons?
We might want to set up various functions. For instance, a function repository function that is called music brains data that understands the music brains identifiers. Yeah? So we have a function.
But wouldn't that just be, entity value of external identifier music brains, comma, whatever?
Could there be an option to specify which knowledge base, like Wolfram knowledge base versus Wikidata versus music brains?
Well, that's why we have external identifier. That's the wrapper that defines that.
It could identify it, but there could still be more than one lookup service for that same identifier.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I see.
And we don't want, I think, the possible property string to depend on what is earlier.
Even though one server might support different properties than another server. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What a mess. So wait a minute. The external identifier is an identifier across all servers, but which properties you can get may depend on which server you happen to go to. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So the identifier types are defined abstractly, and then there are various services that.
Okay. Well, so the analog for web image search is that there's a method option that says what server you're going to.
But then how do you deal with auto-completion that is specific to a service?
I don't know. I mean, you can obviously look at what's in the first argument. But okay, let's hold on one second. Okay, so SWSH on our live stream is saying, shouldn't there be a more general modifier for Wikidata entities similar to dated? more general modifier of what kind? I mean, I don't think we know what the modifiers can be.
I mean, the modifiers are again dependent on the external service. Like for
Yes.
archive, you might want revision 3 of a paper.
In
ISBN,
principle-
you don't have a revision.
In principle, there could be some limited support for dated, but then Wikidata uses various date qualifiers. So it might just have a date or point in time, but it also might have a start date and end date, and which one do you mean? So this,
Yeah. Well, I understand that this ontology is not nearly as clean as ours, so it isn't. I mean, we have to deal with that. All right. Well, look, I'm agreeing that Wikidata data is probably the right thing because it's going to return this list. I think it should say very clearly it returns a list of values, and I think the example you give should have a list. First example maybe doesn't have, I mean, should have multiple values, so it's a
Yes.
little bit clearer what the heck's going
Yes.
on.
I'll add a lot more examples.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about the graphic design here. Okay, so I don't like the fact that in the output it is returning with boldface. Is there a reason for that?
No particular reason.
Okay, well,
Just following.
it seems like a bad idea. What are we following? It's not following what we're doing for other things.
Well, it kind of is bold in New York City over there. Maybe a little
No,
bit bigger,
that's in
though.
the input, not the output. Okay?
Yes, okay. You were pointing to the output before, and then Albert Einstein is in the input.
Right.
Okay.
So what are we going to do here? Are we going to do the same convention for input and output? I think that makes sense to do that.
I agree.
Okay.
There
Now,
are also other objects to consider that are laying on the other side of identifiers, for instance, quantities or date objects. Yeah. So those form a family of identifying different aspects of the world. And they should all be in some sense uniform next to each other, or URLs.
yeah, and I don't think it's right what we're doing with dates. And I thought we had a meeting set up to fix that. I don't think we want this thing here, and I think there's no reason to have this be bold. Okay, so if that hasn't already been set up, can we please get a meeting set up to go over that? Yes, no? Boy, it's really frustrating.
Yes, I can speak
that
with
without a project manager. It really is a mistake. Okay, so get that in, please. Either the ILD meeting or the Design UX meeting. Shall I send a message about that, or
No, I said I did.
Okay, all right, fine. Neither of us are the right people to do that, but it's okay. Jesse is asking, how is the order of values in the list determined? Who knows? I mean, it's what the
It's
Sparkle query
undefined.
return. Okay, all right, so looking at this here, this white with the blue thing with white seems okay to me. I mean, is there any reason why that's a bad idea? Anybody want to comment on that?
It's kind of similar to the formatting for data object.
That's not a good reason. Everything's similar to the formatting for data object. I mean,
One thing I liked
Well,
was
the
when you
color.
scroll down in your example notebook over here, there was a point where there were some links, and the links had a different formatting. Sorry, I was talking about the notebook. Yeah, right there. And then
doesn't seem to have.
where'd
What
it
are we
go?
talking about here? Okay, because this is a link as opposed to this thing isn't a link. This thing, you click it. I mean, this on the input. What are we getting here? If we click that on the input, it is a link. Correct?
Both
Is
input and
that
output.
correct, or is that not correct? I believe that's correct. Right? That's correct. That is a link. Okay, this is not a link. If you click this, it goes back and gives you the lets you type it in again, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so that has to be indicated somehow. And what you've done here with this tooltip, which doesn't seem to even come up for the input, which seems like a bug to me, or did it just come up intermittently?
Well, it's a front end thing. Sometimes
Okay,
if you,
fine.
it should
Okay,
be.
so
Yeah.
the point I'm making, okay, so it came up in that case. The point I'm making, this is a link, right? So we've got a dot in the other case indicating that you can reselect it, but somehow we need something here that indicates that this is a link. Possibly on hover, it should bring up some kind of greater than or something, or what? How else could we indicate that it is a link? Or alternatively,
Yeah, if you go to this Untitled 2 notebook, I think there were some other, that was the notebook
which
I was trying to
Untitled
look
2 notebook?
for.
This one here?
Yeah, and then if you scroll.
We don't have anything else in here, and
There
we're
it is.
about to run out of time. Here. Oh, I see. Okay, so
and then there
the
was
fact
the
that
darker blue.
okay, so the fact that there's a linking. What are you talking about? There's the thing that came up for a moment there was a link icon, a hyperlink icon, right? Is that what you were talking about, or something different?
Just to scroll down a little bit below, there's right at the edge of the notebook. Yep, right there. Those URLs. There's they
that's
have
something
chevrons.
completely different. Yeah, that's something completely different. Right?
So
that's a raw URL, which is something completely different.
Right, but they also have the chevrons. So
I understand that, but that's representing a URL. This is not, its primary function is not representing a URL. Okay, so I think what we should do here, I don't know whether every single one of these wants to have a link icon, whether that's useful. I don't know.
I would actually say maybe no, because if you click around in Wikipedia, not every link has another symbol next to them. Maybe just the indication of this.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Can you click and go to a page on the web or not? For every one of these, is it not the case that there is a page on the web?
It depends on the identifier type. Some define a link, others don't.
Okay, so like this one here. That one doesn't appear to be a link. So that one is something different. Oh, that one is a Facebook Places ID, which is not a link. Okay, and I don't understand that wiki ID. Okay, so what that's doing in that mouse over looks crazy, right? With that white blob on top of the gray background.
Yes, so there's Wikidata ID identifying.
I understand what it is. I know what it is. I'm saying the format looks wrong.
Yeah, so
I took a screenshot. I'll include it in the next mockup, or at least in the next conversation with Tony.
Okay.
So it should recursively.
Okay, but so is it the case that everything identified with a Wikidata ID has a link to the web?
Yes, because Wikidata ID defines links.
Yes, that's what I thought. So the correct statement is there are other external identifiers that don't define links. And why does it say Wikidata ID as opposed to something, as opposed to just Wikidata? Given that these things, why is it correct to have the ID there?
I think that was in one of your earliest design notebooks. The identifier types should contain the word ID or number.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's right. I mean,
it is a little bit confusing since we can have a label that isn't, in fact, the ID.
So you think it should rather say Wikidata? Since it isn't the ID.
Yeah, that is why we have this open question. If you specify a label, should it be shown next to the actual ID or replace it?
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
So if you say in the design notebook or the graphic design notebook on top, you see a few examples where the actual number is shown in addition to the label. Let's say gravitation. Do you show the ISBN number or not?
I would think in that case, and it bugs me so much that it's in boldface, which it shouldn't be. But look, Wikidata, that is an entity whose label is whatever it is. So it should say just Wikidata : whatever, I think.
And
But then
what-
ISBN 10 is an ISBN. But the fact that there is a book named that is a subsidiary fact. Is that not true? Or does ISBN
I would see it the
really
other way around.
Okay. But then it should say ISBN book : or something. Because ISBN 10 is, like Wikidata ID, is the name for an identifier, not the name for a thing. Am I making sense?
Yes.
This is very weird. So down here, Comic Vine, for example, is, oh boy, we're getting ourselves tangled up here. Okay, so the Wikidata ID is something like Q7582 or something, right?
Yes.
That's the analog of the ISBN. But instead here, we're not showing that because we think it's kind of stupid and irrelevant. We're instead showing the label for that Wikidata entity, correct? But in Comic Vine ID, we are merely showing the ID because we don't know because it doesn't seem to have a label. Is that correct?
Oh, we could include the label, but...
Well, does it always have a label?
Yes, because it's coming from the Wikidata item. So that has a label.
No. This Comic Vine ID is an external identifier to Comic Vine.
But
right?
The statement in Wikidata is that this is the same object identified inside a different system. So it deserves the same label.
No, I'm not convinced about this, Tony, because it might be the same object, but different people might call it different.
Okay, good
depending on the service.
So, okay, but to know what this is, okay, arch inform location. Boy, that's the ID. But I think what we're seeing here is that there are two different concepts. One is that we choose to use the label. Now, which services have labels? Only Wikidata or lots of services?
Basically, most or all I know, Music Brains has names for their albums.
Okay, all right. So then what I think...
But what is a label is a little bit our choice.
Fine.
Like there isn't a canonical label in any of them.
I'm sorry, there isn't a canonical label.
I don't think so. Like for the book, like for the ISBN, one would naturally say the book title is a good label, but there's... You might well do say the seventh book of this person might be as good a label.
No, I understand. I understand. So here's a possibility. If there is a label, we simply say giant bomb : and then whatever the label for this is, right? Hiding the 3035109 on the grounds that that's not really relevant to the user. We don't have the ID there. If we fail and all we have is an ID, then what we do is we say giant bomb : and then in the same font ID and then the ID. You see what I'm saying?
To get that terminology clear, what you see on the left in the white box is called the type label. And you're saying that the type label should depend on whether the ID label is present.
I'm saying, yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the type label is always the same. It's always giant bomb : that's the type label. But then on the right, we're either giving the label or we're saying ID blah if we cannot find a label.
So, but in the case of DOI, what would we say if the label is available?
We would say DOI : well, let's take ISBN. We'd say ISBN 10 : gravitation. There's the label. There's no ID. And the ISBN number is a separate thing. Right? We're merely using the ISBN service to refer to an entity. See what I'm saying?
Right.
And that seems like in some cases we kick out the ID or number, and in others we don't.
No. If we can't find a label, we fall back to saying ID and then the ID. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but if we have a label for a particular book, say gravitation, then how do we get rid of the N in ISBN, which stands for number?
We don't. It's just a service. ISBN-10 is a service that is an entity service for books.
And what about DOI? How do we get rid of the I in DOI?
We don't. It's DOI. That is a service. If there's a service, the first element here is the entity service.
Okay.
DOI. It's like saying HTTP or something. Well, that's a protocol, but you see what I'm saying? It's like that's the service that is providing this information.
Okay, and then in the case of Music Brains, we also would have either Music Brains artist if we have the label, or Music Brains artist ID if we don't.
No. Remember, the ID goes on the right-hand side of the colon. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right. So it's just it is the same font as what's on the left-hand side, but it's on the right-hand side. So it reads, DOI colon ID blah if we didn't have a label for the thing. Okay, so yes, we're repeating the word ID, I think. Does that make sense?
So in an input, the ID would not appear bold. It would appear.
Yeah, that's correct. It appears the same way that it appears right now on the left of the colon. Right? Only the label appears bold. And it wouldn't appear bold in the output. Go ahead.
Is there another character to use other than colon? So it's not like colon ID colon.
There's no colon after the ID. It's just
on the left side.
Base. What?
Oh, you just said it. You answered it. Okay, there's no colon on the right side. You're saying.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's just ID in small letters and then the actual ID.
So to clarify, could you write down the example for Music Brains, the two cases that we have?
I think it's really easy. I mean, I don't understand. Is it the same service or is it a different service? Is it one service or is it two services?
So there's a two-layer thing. There's the organization Music Brains that defines the identifiers, and there are multiple services that allow you to use them.
Okay, so the service goes on the left-hand side of the colon. So the service is Music Brains artist if it's using that service, and we're combining the fact that there's a base service called Music Brains is the idea here is it's service colon and then however we identify that entity.
Okay.
Right. Jesse is pointing out that this is analogous to what happens with entities with canonical name versus common name. We have run out of time, unfortunately, but we probably need to continue this a bit.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's great, but it's just there's a few details that we should get right.
Okay, so we try to make some changes, maybe 2-3 days again.
Okay, fine. But just to clarify a couple of things here. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is such a mess saying subreddit and then other ones are ID. I think this is the right thing. So it would look like external identifier and then the service for the external identifier, and then whatever the identifier is, just like an entity, but then the print form has the thing with the label, right? That's what you're doing here, just like it works with entity. Okay, anyway, to be continued. All right, and thanks. There was a few other comments on our live stream. Yeah, I mean, this thing with the lists is a mess. And there's some comments from Karks about freshness, which seem interesting. which Tony should look at. I don't.
Yes.
That has some.
So, and shall I rename Wikidata data to Wikidata value, or
No, do not.
Okay. Okay. And
Do
shall I
not.
move the context? What shall I do next in terms of
Well, I don't know.
getting
I mean,
those ready?
yes, we should get them ready. I mean, they're going in. They're
Okay,
going in.
great.
We just got some details to work out.
Okay,
Yes.
then we can move them context.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, good work. Thank you all. Okay,
Thanks.
see ya.